Hello, Leafys. Oh dear, I seem to have come over all South African. Alright, housekeeping. The pretentious and brainy videos that I've been doing, doing okay, I guess. They do take a lot more effort and time to produce, of course, and so represent a bigger gamble on the amount of effort and the time I put into them as compared to other things I might put time or effort into. So, I don't know. I'm going to experiment with doing one video like that a week, unless I get a bug up my ass about doing some other topic more in depth. But otherwise, yeah, gonna look at doing maybe one a week. I discovered a quite significant snafu at Lulu the other day, and so other publishers might want to be aware of this, or anyone else that uses Lulu for anything else that earns them money. So the email address that was primary on my PayPal account, I had to change, because my email address and domain name went through about 3 different owners in rapid succession, and then the last owner just finally decided to get rid of it altogether, so I had to change over. So I had to change the primary email associated with my PayPal account, and apparently that means Lulu can't pay you, even though secondary emails can still be on the account. And so Lulu hadn't been paying me since about June 2023, without me noticing, because, you know, I'm that good a businessman that I stay on top of these sorts of things. So on the plus side, I had over £1,000, well over £1,000 in escrow, stuck at Lulu, which is now on its way to me, but yeah, you might want to watch for that. Weirdly, some payments, some aspects of payments, some parts of payments had been coming through on occasion. It's just the regular payments hadn't been, for whatever reason. I don't know. Their back end is a mystery to me, but yeah. I'd run out of books to review recently, which was good, I suppose. So I had been delving into my archive more, but the other day, books are like buses, I guess. 3 came along at once. So it's feast or famine. I've got the Fabula Ultima Techno Fantasy and GM kit finally came. And I have a preview of a thing called Rip Crypt, which is going to be launching in March. So I have a pre-release edition of that to do a little preview thing on. I don't know whether I'll make it a review. It seems a bit unfair to do that to a pre-release thing, and when someone has been so nice as to select me to go over it. I've only skimmed it so far. I haven't read it in depth, so I don't know whether anything I say would be mean or good yet, but I guess you can look forward to that. I will try to be generous, because people deserve encouragement when they're, taking a step out into publishing. As for what I'm currently working on, several pretentious scripts for the YouTube channel, for potential future topics, while I have the brain power for it. I am also working on my solo RPG using the description system. Slow going. The keyboard on my laptop is failing, which is what I could spend that £1,000 windfall on, I suppose. So it's making working on anything significantly more difficult, because the cluster of keys around the I key are failing. I've got a cheap little USB plug-in keyboard which I'm plugging away with in the meantime, because stubbornly I'm not going to buy a new laptop until I really need one. Other than that, yeah, I'm still working on book 2 of Ronin, and still hopefully on course to launch a crowdfunder of some kind for that in March. Hopefully, maybe on Kickstarter. I don't know. I don't have experience with Kickstarter, only Indiegogo, so I'm a bit gun shy. So I'm not sure. But Kickstarters tend to attract more funding, so I don't know. That money will primarily be going on art. Anyway, diving into comments. On Cozy Games, Lauren says, I have a challenge, and because of it, I'm limited to some cozy RPGs. I accept the challenge. I don't play anything with undead or magic. As you can imagine, that limits my options of RPG rule sets. I also do not like to play things that are more cartoony, as you say. Mouse Guard is okay, but, you know, Burning Wheel. It isn't my jam, I'm not against it. I'd play if my friends did. I also like the more mechanical and mathy rule sets. Most of the space/futuristic RPGs are okay, except the ones that contain zombies, as they are undead. They are off the table. I'd play a ton more RPGs if they didn't have such dependency on dipping into the spiritual to get monsters and storylines. Okay, I'm going to try to be gentle and generous here, but you know, ghosts and zombies and things, they're not real, and they are almost always the enemy, and so you are fighting these evil spiritual manifestations and putting them down. When it comes to science fiction settings, zombies and so on may not be spiritual at all. It may be nanites or parasites, or some sort of unknown quantity that is animating and puppeting the dead. Similarly, magic can stem from, well, I don't know why you're avoiding things with undead or magic. Usually, in my experience, it's some sort of religious reason. But there are miracles, which are really no different to spells in a lot of game rules, and plenty of game settings allow you to play out your real spirituality in the form of a game. I guess I found the one person in the world for whom those notorious Christian RPGs back in the day may have had some appeal. I don't know. Sometimes working with a limitation is good because it can spur you to be creative. Sometimes it just hems you in. So, yeah, it sounds like you want something crunchier. I mean, you could just play with generic rule sets and strip out the elements you don't like. If you want something hardcore simulationist, but still familiar from D&D and their ilk, you could do worse than Axe, ACKS. There's a new edition at the moment that has plenty of in-depth rules for all sorts of stuff you might want to do. So, very crunchy. Good luck getting a cozy group to go along with it, though. Wraithing says, Terry Nation's survivors always had some of the feel of, as Brian Aldiss termed Wyndham's Day of the Triffids, a cozy catastrophe. But that seemed to make the emergent and post-apocalypse feel very much more realistic by juxtaposing the brutality of nature, necessity, and human survivors with taking small comfort and delight in the cozy artifacts of ordinary life. Total coziness in a game doesn't tend to appeal to me because of the lack of any reality. I can't disconnect it to imaginatively recreate that Camberwick Green fantasy. My own experience of village life makes it hard to see them as in any way pleasant. And animals rarely live cozy or friendly lives. Sex, pregnancy, subsistence, and death is extremely important to wildlife. If they're not struggling against starvation or hypothermia, being predated by carnivores or a variety of birds, they're getting gassed by exterminators, poisoned by agrochemicals, or squashed by the many vehicles of sightseers crowding and polluting beauty spots. Then there's the sad, crappy lot of farm animals. Good grief, cozy can be fucking depressing. Yeah, if you use it to hold up a mirror, in the case of Watership Down, or if you consider it in sharp relief to what things are really like. Yeah, a lot of people have this fantasy of a sort of return to the land. I think it's very strong in the UK, but you also see it with a kind of libertarian, gun-toting, Wild West sort of tinge in the States as well. The cozy catastrophe, though, does seem to be a very strong thread through British fiction and films and so on. I think you see some of that in The Walking Dead in the sort of later seasons where everything is broken down. They don't have the guns so much anymore. A lot of the episodes that other people find incredibly boring, I find interesting. Like, how do you tackle the day-to-day survival? They kind of ruin that by always conveniently finding a closed-off army base or a hidden stash here and there, which kind of takes away from that. But yeah, there aren't that many games that follow that kind of cozy catastrophe feel, and that might be something worth exploring, that whole genre. Now my brain's gone off on a tangent thinking about that now. Shut up, brain. Move on. Beardy Ben says, Grim Jim lives in a bucolic village. That's the quiet desperation of the English life right there. Well, I did used to live in Basingstoke, which was troublesome for other reasons, and I've spent a great deal of time in London, so I've had my experience of city life as well. Country life is dull and boring, but it is at least quiet. Yeah, I've lived here in the same village the vast and overwhelming majority of my life, and I still feel like a bit of an outsider. But I have no particular interest in getting involved in parish politics. So, and part of living here that has been good is that helped me get into fantasy in a way that the actual source material mostly hasn't. Loved Lord of the Rings because I basically live in Hobbiton, and I used to sit up in the woods and listen to the Radio 4 audio version of Lord of the Rings. Yeah, surrounded by trees in a little clearing full of wildflowers and all that kind of thing. So, it has its compensations. It's less interesting or exciting when you're in your 20s, but then that's when I lived elsewhere. So coming back was okay. Jeremy says, now I need to see if cozy/dark can be a thing in TTRPGs. You know what? It probably can. And I think if you ran a long enough campaign of The Walking Dead, I think it would turn into that, or a long enough campaign of Twilight 2000 even could turn into something like that. Or the aforementioned Axe with its various in-depth systems. I think it's possible because the coziness throws the darkness into sharp relief, and vice versa. Let the players make personal connections with NPCs and then kill them. On the RuneQuest 2 retro view, the Know Your Role video, Beetlejuice says, BRP was great then, but narrative systems appeal to a wider audience. Mathematical precision is less fun for many than narrative mechanics, which is why these games are now more niche. So the trend has definitely gone towards unified and relatively light systems, but the big beast is still Dungeons and Dragons. Which isn't a rules light system. It's not a very, very crunchy system, but it still has a lot of moving parts that come together. System mastery is still a thing in D&D, and narrative games like Fate or Powered by the Apocalypse and other ones like that, they're niche, but then so are BRP. It really isn't that complicated. It's a percentile chance to do things at the end of the day. That's really not very complicated. So I don't know. I don't know how true it is. I mean, 5th edition has sucked a lot of the oxygen out of the room in a way that 4th edition didn't. But this 5.5 edition, there might be more wiggle room for other games to emerge and come up. BRP has been around a hell of a long time, and it hasn't changed very much, which is a hallmark of a good system, I think. Paul Berry says, I just ordered Mutant Epoch's expanded player's guide. It really brings back Gamma World memories. What's your favourite post-apocalyptic RPG? I never used to like Gamma World or Gamma Orders, which was in the back of some comics, which we played for a bit. I always tended to prefer something less gonzo and more firmly set. I felt that the 4th edition version of Gamma World was actually pretty good. I think that was angled just about right in terms of 4th edition rules and the way it was done. The adventures and so on weren't terribly good. They were just strings of combat encounters. But I really liked the sort of combine two elements to make your character thing in that. I also have a soft spot for Twilight 2000. Certainly the old GDW game version. Yeah, fond memories of that, like demolishing a house using an APC to get a single sniper by taking the house out from under him, or throwing an anti-tank grenade up the stairs only to botch and have it bounce back down the stairs and nearly kill us all. That was fun. Tribe 8, if you count that as post-apocalyptic, I suppose. Didn't really get to play that very much, but I did like it, like the idea. And as a sort of companion to that one, I guess Earthdawn is a post-apocalyptic RPG. Again, haven't gotten to play it very much, but the ideas are at least appealing. On the Thousand Dead Worlds playthroughs, I was asked if we'll ever see Alex Khan's last sortie into the unknown. I did find the notes on it, but that's even more effort than the pretentious videos, so I have to be in the mood, and I need to finish that last expedition as well, which involves my brain remembering what was going on from the notes that I've made. And lastly, on the Kalergi plan, because some of the comments on this have been pissing me off lately. I think people have been stirred up by the recent UK election and the forthcoming US election. And it's the same stupidity every time, basically. So Dirty Ziggy says, this guy looks completely stupid when you look at the statistical analysis, but he calls it a desire. And Ret to Lib says, London is now 37% native British, but it's a conspiracy. The subset identifying specifically as white British, English, Welsh, Scottish, Northern Irish or British accounted for around 36.8% of London's population. Okay, so common mistakes here. There's not really such a thing as native British. People had to come here, and they have come here in various waves over a great deal of time. There's really no such thing as native anywhere. Even in Ethiopia, where mankind first evolved, probably people left and then came back and displaced the original native population. Assuming that this person means British citizens who were born here, they're being misleading again by substituting white British for that meaning, and British born, they seem to swap these back and forth depending on the time. Only about, well, it's still a large chunk, but only about 40% of London's population are first-generation immigrants, meaning that around 60%, not around 36%, are native. You know, you can be non-white and you can be British. And there's this underlying assumption that all these people have that it's necessarily bad in some way that people are coming to the UK. I would challenge that assumption anyway. The other thing they keep missing is that this is about proportions. Nobody is being replaced. Nobody gets taken away when a bunch of people move to an area, it's all additive. And if a bunch of white people have kids and a bunch of black people have kids, nobody's still being replaced. It's just additive. Yeah, it's basic maths, or statistics, proportions, you might say. Zang. There are certain kinds of people, ale-drinking people, people who did a little too much acid in the 60s, people who wear large warm jumpers and take long brisk walks in the countryside. These people maintain that fairies not only exist, but that they are very common. They also tend to believe that fairies are a countryside phenomenon, much like casual cruelty to animals, sexual intercourse with sheep, and having an impenetrable and parochial accent. This is, of course, rather wide of the mark. Fairies have always had a strong relationship with man, darning his socks, cobbling his shoes, cleaning his houses, drowning him, marrying him, and swapping his children for malformed hydrocephalics as a bit of a jape, and otherwise aiding or demeaning the efforts of man. Fairies do not need our belief to exist, they need us and the things that we leave around. Like an urban fox or the aerial rat known as the pigeon, if they survive, they will have adapted to city life and found their niches, not in tending to flowers and trees, but in crashing computers, letting down the tyres on people's cars, and eating leftover pizza. Urban Fairy is a game of those kind of fairies, gone feral and urban, adapted to modern life. It's a comedy game of hijinks, weirdness, and strangeness, and it almost runs itself. You want Urban Fairy Pocket Edition, which is revised and updated with better art and edited writing, and it's available from post-mort.com, DriveThruRPG, and lulu.com.